Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cognition podcast. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Hutch. I'm an innovation principal at Trace3 and the author of The Language of Deception, Weaponizing Next Generation AI.
And I am Len Noe, technical evangelist for CyberArk software and author of the upcoming book, Human Hacked, My Life and Lessons as the World's First Augmented Ethical Hacker. So it's been a bit. Sorry about that.
Yep, life gets in the way sometimes. I think we both had to postpone a couple of recordings here, so it has been a minute since we've recorded, but definitely excited to be back into it. A lot has happened since we last met. So we have a number of different news articles that we are going to discuss today. We're going to talk about some more OpenAI drama, because that always seems to be a hot topic. The first AI beauty pageant. We're going to talk about Microsoft recalling its new recall capability, and then also talk about a number of different news articles that went out talking about a new head transplant technology. So we'll cover each of those, and then after we talk about the news section, we are going to jump into a very topical discussion, which is election security in the digital era.
Now, before we get to that, we are not going to be talking about candidates, parties, or politics. So before everybody wants to start spamming us that, we're picking a side, our side is security.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into the news. And as I mentioned, the first one is related to the most recent OpenAI drama. And this was an interesting one because we actually talked about this on our last episode. In our last episode, OpenAI had just released the announcements for their new GPT 4.0 or 4 Omni model. And specifically, some of the video demos contained its new voice capability. And we even talked about during that episode how
they cloned Scarlett Johansson's voice, man.
How similar the voice was to Scarlett Johansson in the movie Her, which of course was a movie that had unbelievable foresight because it was over a decade ago. Joaquin Phoenix, Scarlett Johansson did the voice of this AI, and the likeness to what was presented in that movie to now what we're seeing a decade later is uncanny. And I think there's some of that is probably incredible foresight, but another side of that is, like you said, probably inspiration from the movie itself.
How can it not be?
Well,
you with all due respect, and I know I'm jumping into your segment and you're Mr. AI guy. I've seen that image that they supposedly the ultimate generic image of like all the faces out there. I don't think if you did the same kind of a pool against a voice, I don't think that's what we would have got back.
No,
there's choice in this.
Well, what's interesting is I have heard a few people refer to this as the new blue dress phenomenon. And the reason that I say that, for anybody that doesn't remember, there was a few years ago, there was this viral image that was going around the internet, and some people swore that it was a blue dress and others swore that it was a gold dress. And it just, there wasn't, I saw some attempts at scientific explanations as to why people would see it differently, but you just saw it the way you saw it. And with this, there are a number of people like me that I listen to that voice, and to me it is identical to Scarlett Johansson's voice. But there are other people that have listened to it and will listen to the voices side by side and say, no, it's nothing like her. It doesn't sound even remotely like her, which is crazy to me because I can't hear anybody else when I listen to it.
Neither can I. And I just find it interesting. And even with the concepts of legal stuff, the amount of publicity that OpenAI is getting just off of this is worth more than they would have ever been able to spend in a marketing budget.
That is probably true. Now, of course, the update on this, since we talked about how it sounded like Scarlett Johansson before, is now kind of the legal troubles. Scarlett Johansson now has a legal team that is pursuing legal action against OpenAI, and some interesting things have come out in light of that. And one of those was that, of course, people kind of looked back at some of the tweets that Sam Altman himself had made. And prior to the release announcement of GPT-4 Omni, he had actually tweeted out just a single word, her, which of course was the title of the movie where Scarlett Johansson played the AI voice assistant. And then also, it turns out that on multiple occasions, Scarlett Johansson was approached by OpenAI and even directly by Sam Altman to be the voice of this system, and had declined and told them that she didn't want to do it for personal reasons. And what's interesting is I did a little bit of looking back at kind of Scarlett Johansson's relationship, so to speak, with AI, and she has been a staunch advocate against deep fake simulations of people, and herself has been a victim of a number of adult deep fake videos and stuff like that. So I don't know to what extent that played a role in her decision, but she did unequivocally tell them, I do not want to be the voice of this thing. And then they rolled it out, and
now we'll see what happens.
It definitely seems like it's her. But so yeah, some interesting legal issues going on. I have seen some interesting feedback from some independent journalists that have looked into some of the documentation from OpenAI, and it does show that they did, one, use a separate actor that was not her, so it wasn't trained explicitly on, at least from what I've seen, trained specifically on her. And then the next question is, well, did they deliberately try to find somebody that sounded just like her? And at least according to what they looked at, it said that nothing about the job description or the screening process ever said sounds like Scarlett Johansson. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, if it lands them some trouble. But to your point, Len, this is probably just getting even more attention to their product. So they, at the end of the day, they probably still win.
Even if you lose, you win if you're OpenAI in this situation.
Yep, for sure.
So this one I heard about, and actually I completely lost my mind over this. So the world's first AI beauty pageant. And just like with every normal beauty pageant, there are social media profiles created. There are Instagram accounts, there are pictures being pushed, and these are now being looked at as potential digital sponsors for products moving forward. And the thing, I was listening to an article, a newscast on this, and the one thing that just completely blew my mind, and it hadn't even occurred to me until, one of the guests started speaking on it, is they went with the traditional beauty pageant view of what a beauty pageant contestant should look like. It was female, one head, two arms, two legs. It was, imagine just walking into the Miss Universe or the Miss USA or Miss whatever country, and they're up there doing their walks in the gowns and the bathing suits and, all of that. Each one of these artificial intelligent contestants had their own charities. It was like watching a regular beauty pageant. And the one thing that came out of it, the comments that really made me start to think, was, why did we go with the traditional sense? This is an AI beauty pageant. Why didn't we have a robot? Why didn't we have, a humanoid looking person or entity? Maybe it has two heads, maybe it has 5 arms. This is now in the realms of anything is possible, but we still stuck to what we perceive. And it almost made me think back to the episode we did a couple of times ago, where is this, where we're looking at the uncanny valley in a different perspective. Even though we have the opportunity to do anything we want, it's artificial intelligence, it's fake. We all know it's fake. We can't bring ourselves to really step off of the traditional human concept of what we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think a couple things when I think of that. One, I feel like humanities has a very myopic perspective of what beauty is. It's perfect symmetry. I think that we are, uh, unfortunately, and I think probably some of that is culturally instilled too. But the other thing is that fascinated me, and Lynn, you pointed this out to me, that this pageant ranked not just on beauty but also on level of engagement. And so to me,
Absolutely.
what's fascinating about that, one, I think that itself does kind of incentivize traditional beauty standards. You're going to try to create something that's going to appeal to the masses. But two, and I think even more fascinating, is that unlike traditional beauty pageants, this in a way seems to be incentivizing deception. Because while there's some people that may be joining or following these profiles that know that they're AI influencers, they probably don't have the following that they do without deceiving a large amount of people in
I would
that
agree with
believe that they're following a human influencer when in fact they aren't.
and let's take that point just a minute and run with it. So traditionally, we have always had sponsors for products. Whether that's the Budweiser frogs, or I'm trying to think what's another good, really well known Clydesdales. You know, what these have always been either real actors or some type of copyrightable, animation in terms of like the Budweiser frogs. But I want to key on what you said in terms of deception. I'm actually questioning if the actual purposes behind this AI beauty pageant is not to actually just try and create brand awareness and some type of spokesperson that you don't have to pay.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think that there is definitely, and I'm not sure if, so I think one of the challenges is, at least with as much as I've played with some of the technology around this, is it's really tough to get consistency. So you can very easily create something that looks like a single person via a lot of the deepfake photograph generating technology now, but it's really hard to generate multiple photos that look like the exact same person and get consistency across the board when using generative AI. And I think that that probably will become easier. And I think as that does, we're likely going to get to the point where many companies probably will move away from human influencers in order to drive sales to their product. And probably, I mean, this seems like almost unquestionably is going to ultimately be the cheaper option.
And with the amount of followers that a lot of these artificial intelligent contestants have gotten, it's proven that it's a viable strategy as well.
Yeah.
So uh, we talk all the time about how AI is not going to take over everything right away. Well, apparently, beauty pageant people, I don't know what to tell you.
Yep. Sorry. One more thing that the robots are taking away. All right. So the next one that we had was Microsoft recently announced a new feature in the Windows 11 operating system, and they are going all in on integrating artificial intelligence into every single aspect
Everything.
of their new operating system. And this new feature is, so as soon as they announced it, there were people on the privacy side, on the cybersecurity side, that immediately were like, this is a really bad idea. But essentially what it does is, as you interact with your computer and your desktop, every 5 seconds or so, it is taking another screenshot of your desktop, and then it's allowing generative AI, and specifically a large language model, to reflect on, and a multimodal large language model at that, but to reflect on the content of those images and capture that into kind of a long-term memory of everything that you've been doing. And so you now are essentially everything that you ever do on your computer. If you ever access anything sensitive, if you ever, I mean, even for myself, I have decent security hygiene. I use a password manager, but there are certain places where I actually, if I'm moving that password from one place to another, I sometimes have to actually show that password on the screen. at that point, your password is captured. It's now hiding in a screenshot or possibly even in a summary that was captured through the reflection of that AI onto that image. And
I
so
think I think we should.
Microsoft,
I think we need to petition to get the name of this changed. I don't think it should be called Recall. I think this should be called Windows 11 Big Brother.
it is. Yeah, I think that is a more fitting name. Now, I will say, Microsoft did listen. Like I said, there was all of that outcry, and shortly after all of the concern was presented on this, the first thing that they did was they said they were going to make this a non-default feature, and then they essentially halted plans to deploy this altogether, or at least for now, and have tabled it. It is not going to deploy with all of the other features, at least initially. And so there at least was, I think, a level of transparency of what they were doing here. So we can give Microsoft credit for that. And of course, when people cried foul and said, this is a really bad idea, and I don't want this level of visibility.
Overreach.
Yep. That they did pump the brakes, which is nice to see for a change.
Well, let's call it for what it is. It's unusual, and I have to argue one point where you were like, yeah, it's going away. No, it's only going away temporarily. They will find a way to try and shoehorn this thing in there somehow, some way. But from the offensive security professional in me just goes, ooh. So, I don't know if you know the answer to this question because I wasn't able to find it. Where is it storing all of this collected data? Is it local? Are we going to store it in the cloud? Is it hybrid? Is it something that somebody like me might be able to get my hands on?
So somebody that was playing with one of the early versions of it did already develop a tool for scraping this data out.
Wow, what a concept!
I don't recall, and of course this is, and I think this is why cybersecurity professionals are like, this is a bad idea. Is oftentimes some of the best places to gather information on a compromised system. It's not the file system. It is it's your browser. It's things that you're storing in there. It is stuff that you're storing in application data, and of course system level information too. I don't recall if it was a privileged part of the file system or not. But regardless, I mean, systems are going to get compromised, and this is going to be retrievable.
And the other thing that scares me about this is, okay, let's pretend for just a minute that they're utilizing some type of Azure service and, it's all going back to them some way, somehow. This is, I'm not trying to, totally pick on Microsoft, but, well, it's so easy. This is the same company that forgot to update their own certificate on their own website.
That is
one. And there is a reason that we have every Patch Tuesday.
Yep. So something to look forward to. Because, like you said, I'm sure this is going to pop up again at some point. And the truth is that there is a lot of really good use cases. It's just, what are we willing to give up for those use cases? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, it would be cool to, I mean, I have brain farts all the time where I'm like, where did I do the thing that, and I may have some context of what I was doing, but I don't remember the specific details. Something like this, you could just ask the question and potentially, I mean, search and retrieval has been difficult for generative AI, but potentially it would find exactly what you were trying to think of. And so that's neat. But am I really willing to let something have access to every single moment of my computer interactions and record all of that?
If it was something that I was in control of, I knew where it was, and I was responsible for the security, like if it was my own private system, maybe. I mean, I definitely would give it more consideration than what I would give this. But, for me, it's not about the access to the data. It's who owns it. How are they going to use it? And the last thing I'll put on this is, even though we have EULAs and all of that, I can't help just but wonder, even how with the amount of data required for artificial intelligence and model learning and things, I just feel like everything that we do, everything we say, everything we type, regardless of how mundane at this point, is now valuable to some model somewhere.
It is, which is an unfortunate incentive to have because it means that somebody's going to be sucking it up at every single corner. But
Yep.
and not that that's new, but only a greater incentive to continue
Yeah.
to collect more and more data on us to continue to move forward in this kind of dystopic surveillance capitalism world that we live in. But,
Go AI.
yeah, for sure. All right, so this last one was really interesting. There was a article that came out from the New York Post, and I think there was a couple of other different media companies that published articles falling for what was essentially a hoax. So there was not only a video, but a very compelling website of a new groundbreaking technology solution that was going to be used for prototyping surgeries for head transplants, for removing one person's head and putting it on another. And of course, people were alarmed that, how is this even a thing? And what was, I think a couple things were fascinating about this. One was that a lot of people believed it, and I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily their fault because the website was extremely convincing. And I do think that new AI capabilities are making it easier and easier to build increasingly believable hoaxes like this. So I have no doubt that there was some likely level of investment from generative AI to try to build this out. But also, what was interesting was the way that this was found out was the YouTube video that was linked to by the fake company website was actually the same YouTube channel that had previously done another hoax video on a company called Ectolife, which was basically these technology wombs for growing humans. And so that was how we figured out that it was fake. A couple different journalists came after New York Post and were like, no, this is not real. But it was interesting how a lot of those articles also acknowledged that while it's not real right now, this may actually be a thing at some point. And they actually apparently, so I was looking into some of the history on this, and they actually did this on a monkey, and it was a good 30 or 40 years ago, but they did a full head transplant and essentially just quickly tried to reconnect all of the different circulatory system and everything, the tissue. And again, this was 30 or 40 years ago, so probably very crude techniques, very tools that don't have near the precision that we have now. And apparently the monkey was alive and maintained consciousness for almost a full day before it passed away. So I think that alone shows that this technology may be conceivably possible at some point, but we're not there yet. And it is amusing to see what's almost like a massive orchestrated deep fake hoax around this.
And the question that begs is, as you said, there was a lot of effort put into this. What was the end game? That was the one question that I wanted to know. If you just want to put out some kind of a fake, thing, and you want to try and, I don't know, get the New York Post to look like a fool, so be it. Yeah. But there's no gain in that. We work in cybersecurity, so there's always got to be a reward. Where is the reward behind all of the effort that was put into the video, the website, the whole story? Where is it, and what is it?
Yeah, the only thing we really have to go off of is same YouTube channel as the Ectolife. I would say possibly just trolling. There definitely is kind of some satisfaction that people get out of just making a fool of other people.
And I'm good with that.
And there's been some pretty elaborate trolling efforts, so this may just be that. I can't personally see any other end game here. Doesn't mean there isn't one, but
no, yeah, and I love the video, the arms with the hands.
Yeah, it was. It's it looked exciting. Like it was, and honestly, when I first saw it, I didn't realize it was fake. So I was like,
neither did I. And as a transhuman, I'm going, ooh, we can do heads now. Does that mean I can, put my big head on a much more svelte?
Get that cybernetic body.
Yeah, I want muscles and a six pack.
There you go. turn back time. I like it.
Yeah, and that bad knee. Don't need a knee replacement. Just give me a replacement from everything from the neck down.
There you go. The future. All right. Oh. Well, with that, like I said, a lot has happened. Interesting discussion on the news. But another interesting thing that is coming up in the near future is later this year in November, we have a presidential election.
Yep.
And that begs the question of, I think increasingly, each election, we see more and more attempts at digital tampering. We see, and just the potential exposure of cyber attacks. But I think even more so this year is this is our first presidential election cycle in the United States that is in the era of generative AI. Now, that's not to say that there hasn't always been some amount of fake media. There has always been the possibility of people altering images in order to try to push an agenda. But this is definitely the first time that I can type a quick sentence into a image generating system and have something pop out on the other end within seconds to try to mislead or misinform people. So I think it's going to be an interesting year. I think we are only beginning to see the potential problems that are going to come out of this. There was in the New Hampshire primary, we already saw that somebody did essentially a deep fake voice clone of Joe Biden, and they commissioned a number of different robocalls across people across the state of New Hampshire, essentially having Joe Biden's voice saying, "Don't come out and vote in the primaries." And I mean, you can see how just something like that could have such a huge impact on the outcome of primary elections. But if we saw something similar within the presidential election, even within the actual presidential election, which could change the trajectory of this country for another 4 years. And so what was interesting about this is that the FCC really did drop the hammer on this. So they dropped a $6 million fine on this person for orchestrating these robocalls. And I think that the intention is to send a message that we are not playing around, which is probably a message that needs to be sent. But I don't know, Len, what are your thoughts on
I'm just taken back because over the last and we're both mildly aged, and I was thinking as you were talking, it was like, what year did we start hearing "I'm so and so and I approve this message"?
Oh, man, that's as far back as I can remember.
I don't remember it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the point behind that was to try and get the population to go, these are my words and I'm saying them and I stand behind them. And now this is nothing new. We've been watching deepfake technology over the last 2 to 3 years just get better and better and better, up to and including, some of the nasty things that we're seeing today in terms of like cyberbullying through deepfake sexual content. And it's not a problem. Nobody cares until it's either Taylor Swift or the election. No. So in a lot of ways, I'm really angry and upset about this because this is stuff that you and I have been talking about for years. And it's not just the voice and the face anymore. We can have complete sentences. I mean, you remember when what was that producer's name? Peele, director. What's his name? Jordan Peele, I think maybe. But he did that first really good deep fake of Barack Obama.
The one of Obama. Yeah, I do remember seeing that.
Yeah. Yep. And then after that, there was the deep fakes of Elon Musk for all the stuff around Dogecoin. So we've already gone after, politicians and billionaires. But, it's like, I almost wonder if this is almost part of the theater of what's going on. Is we have to kind of keep people in this, we don't know what's real and what's not. Because I'll even admit, frankly, and again, we promised in the beginning we weren't going to go into politics or political parties. But I'm like most people, I'll sit there and flip through YouTube. And, you're seeing all of these ads coming up for all the different candidates and different things. And I actually have to sit and stop and look at it and go, I wonder if that's actually them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make an excellent point with the problem that results from just this ecosystem just existing in a world that has the possibility of these deep fakes, is that question that we're left with of what is real. And I think one of the things that always has stuck out in my mind as an excellent example of this is in the African nation of Gabon. They had one of their political leaders, President Ali Bongo, had suffered a stroke, and he disappeared from the public eye for a period of time because he was recovering, and then emerged some months later and did a teleconference. And when he did, people saw that he was, and he didn't directly address the health issue, but they saw that he was different, that I think he had one of his arms was kind of immobile, and that he struggled with certain aspects of speech, as you often do when you're recovering from stroke. And so rumors started circulating about how it wasn't actually him, and it was a deep fake, and it was a group that was trying to run the country behind a fake persona of him. And that doubt got so bad that it resulted in an actual attempted coup against the government, not because deepfakes were used, but just because of the awareness of the possibility that it could have been deepfakes. We are now in this world where we don't know what is true and what is not. And what's unfortunate is I think when we go into this election, and I will make one prediction in this election, and that's not which candidate is going to win. It is regardless of which candidate is going to win, there is going to be a large percentage of our country that does not accept that those results were valid. And I think we are in this truly politically destabilizing time where we don't know what's true. And increasingly year over year, that is becoming harder and harder. Instead of moving into a world where we're more sure of the truth, I feel like we are going in the opposite direction. And what's fascinating is that feels like a reversal, because it does feel like we had this bright era in human history where travesties in the world and horrible,
there was a lot of development and advancement.
Yeah, there was journalism, and we were able to bring light to those things, and there was enough attention to those things that we were actually able to address a lot of issues. And I think we've started to hit that turning point where we're almost rolling back the clock, and now while we have more and more media, we have less and less assurance that it's actually real. And so we don't know what is true. And so I think that's unfortunate.
With a different question. So we both agree, and I'm not throwing this at you to put you on the spot, because I don't have an answer either. But given the fact that we can no longer believe what we see with our own eyes and we hear with our own ears, what can we do? I mean, how do we reestablish, the true identity of somebody on the other end? I mean, you and I have had offline discussions about, are we at the point where we're going to have to PKI our own, identities? Are we going to have to multi-factor authenticate who we are, or just to prove? Because, if we take, right, we're talking about the election right now, but what was it, 2 months ago that financial worker in, I think it was Japan, that wound up getting convinced by being drawn into a video conference with multiple CEOs.
Yep, $25 million out the door.
$25 million out the door. And the thing is I read that article, and I can't fault that guy.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting here having a conversation just like we're having right now, and it sounds like you, Hutch, and it looks like you, and the next thing I know, you're like, hey, can I borrow $25,000? That might be a little out of character, but it'd be like one of those, next time I see this guy and the next time I'm in Houston, but there's no proof that you're talking to me, and there's no proof that I'm talking to you.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's tough. There are some interesting innovations in kind of sovereign identity, some of that you've showed me. I think a lot of it has a huge obstacle in the way in terms of adoption. I mean, a lot of this requires broad adoption, and that is the biggest challenge.
So back to, where we started in terms of just make election, I'm going to call it security integrity. I have no idea how the general population, especially if they're not in the space like we are and don't know the kinds of attack vectors and mitigation strategies, I don't know how Joe Average or Jane Average can be able to take anything. I mean, I'm honestly waiting for to start seeing a bunch of the stuff coming out on social media, of both candidates saying just the most outlandish things. And I'm honestly surprised it hasn't happened as close as we're at, but I think we're going to see them before we get to November.
Yeah, I think we will too. And some of it, so I guess it's not all bad news. There is a company that I recently met with, and I really liked what they're doing. And for what it's worth, this is not a paid endorsement, or I have no direct affiliation with this company. But the company is Doppel, and they are a digital identity and brand protection company. But one of the things that they specialize in is deep fakes. And one of the things that they have decided to do, and admittedly, there's probably some PR behind this, but it's a fantastic use case for their platform, is they are working on behalf of both of our major parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats, and they are tracking social media for indications of deep fakes on either side, misrepresenting the platforms of any of the major candidates. What was fascinating was in this conversation with them, they pointed out really the level of complexity involved in scraping social media and the internet to identify real deep fakes because of how much context is required for that. Because first of all, you have to understand what's in the video, or in the image. And so one of the great things about some of the new AI technology is that we have those multimodal capabilities where we can reflect on the content of video or images and output text summaries of what is in there. But even more challenging is that you also have to capture intent. So one of the things that we saw when we met with these guys is you'd see all kinds of inflammatory stuff, everything from Joe Biden with a pitchfork and horns to Donald Trump as with a Hitler mustache doing the salute. So extremely inflammatory content. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily deep fakes because it's extreme, it is inflammatory, but it's not attempting to misrepresent the truth to people. It is so even that still falls under
satire.
Yep, satire. That's still considered free speech, and in a lot of cases, it doesn't violate the terms of use for the particular platforms that those are being posted on. And so they really had to build a technology out that not only is able to understand media that's being posted, but reflect on the intent of that media. Is it coming from an account that looks like or is attempting to present itself as that actual candidate? Is the content and the way that it's presented actually done in such a way as to influence somebody to believe that something happened that actually didn't? And that is extremely challenging. And then, of course, you also have the contextual analysis of what platform is it on and cross-referencing that against their terms of use. So there's so much depth to doing this identification of deep fakes. And this is just for the one use case of this upcoming election. So I guess the bad news here is that this is an astronomical challenge, especially when you scale it beyond the election. But even just for the election, this is a huge undertaking. But the good side is that we do have innovative people that are coming up with creative new ways to try to at least apply this technology, which itself is largely kind of the cause of the problem. But if we're going to have the technology anyways, why not use it for the defender side as well and use it to help identify and potentially take down some of this misinformation?
You know, and the truth is, we've only been talking up to this point about deep fakes and the potential for deception and misrepresentation of information. We haven't even gotten into the concept of hardware vulnerabilities within the actual voting machines themselves.
Oh
And
man,
I'm
yeah.
not speak. I don't want a lawsuit, so I'm not calling out any manufacturer of voting machines in general. All I will say is just search for DEF CON and voting machines.
So I will say, and to your point, yes, not calling out any specific manufacturers, but when I was at DEF CON, when we had or when I was in the election village, somebody showed me an exploit on one of these systems. And admittedly, I think this system was only, I mean, it still existed in a couple of states. So it wasn't broadly across the nation, but there were still a couple states that still used these. And essentially showed me a exploit to completely take over the system with less than a minute of direct physical access. And when you think about voting, everybody has private, unattended, direct physical access to that device because you go behind a curtain and it's just you and the machine. And so that's terrifying that even if it is just in a handful of states that type of technology could exist out there. And it's not surprising. I mean, these are digital systems, and we know that if it's digital, there's a
If
way.
it's got an IO, somebody's going to try and own it.
Yep, exactly. So, but you're right. There is an entire another level of concerns related to that.
So, you know, I think we need to do the best we can, but I'm going to just close out my thoughts on this right here with what you said earlier. I don't think it's going to matter who wins. I think a very large percentage, at least 80% or more, will not believe the results. And that in and of itself poses a much bigger challenge to this country.
I agree. Yeah. And I really I believe in the American experiment. So nothing about what I'm saying here is to intended to try to cast doubt
Yeah,
on
agreed.
results. I
I
think that's an unfortunate consequence of where we're at with technology.
And not only technology, but how it's being implemented and the lack of any type of validation or transparency for the end users, and that in that case, end user being citizen.
All right. Well, any final words, Lynn?
Buckle up. I think it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yep, November is not far away. But yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing that I would leave you with is be vigilant. Not everything you see is going to be real. Do whatever you can from a personal perspective to validate what you see before you get upset, before you get angry, regardless of whether it speaks to what you already believe or not.
And especially before you retweet, repost, you know,
think before you amplify.
Think before you amplify. Do the research. Like you said, I will check before I will actually put something on any of my feeds. I've checked it through at least 4 different validating websites, and not all of them are in the United States.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to, and that's unfortunate that all of us have to be investigative journalists at this point, but I think that really is the bar that we should have whenever we are looking into stuff, and especially to your point, if we are sharing or trying to influence others with that information. All right, well, it is going to be an adventure. Well, with that, I think we are done here. So as always, it was a pleasure, and Cognition over and out.
Peace.